Let me just do my job here, closing things out. And that's where's. Okay, Danielle, let me make you a co-host. Okay, and let's see if you can share.
Okay, can everyone see that? Let me see.
Your whole screen. Oh, there you go. Okay, hold on one second. I'm going to start the recording and you'll start the timer. Okay.
Changes through dissemination of the Vermont Occupational Therapy Practitioner School-Based Guidelines. So the purpose of this project is to disseminate information on the voluntary OTP guidelines created by the committee within the Pediatric Special Interest Group of VODA to promote understanding and usability of the guidelines across Vermont public schools. So the goal of the committee writing these guidelines is to clarify the OT's role within the school-based setting. And guidelines are scheduled to be reviewed and approved in fall 2025 by the Vermont Agency of Education. And then once approved, I'll step in and disseminate information to promote professionals' understanding of the guidelines. So Karen Downey is my site mentor, and she has so much experience doing so many things. But just as a brief overview, she has been the treasurer of the VODA board for 6 years. She is coordinator of the VODA Pediatric Special Interest Group. She is co-coordinator of the VODA work group to develop new guidelines since 2023. She was involved with drafting of the guidelines, and initial drafting actually occurred from 1998 to 1999. She also played a role in developing voluntary guidelines for related services during the same time. And she also has some relevant research experience, and she has done school consultations since 1975. She has taught, so just a lot of experience to pull from that really makes her a valuable person to have on this project. So, my needs assessment summary, basically, when I stepped into this project, the need was already established, but I have been talking with Karen Downey, obviously, and then Hannah Kinney and Catherine Armani Munn, which are other coordinators of the committee that have been working with the work group to complete these guidelines. So they have been influencing structuring of education in the sense that they have been giving me topics that are really need to be improved within the schools, and that I'll be focusing on within educational seminars. And then eventually they'll be providing me feedback on my educational materials before I actually disseminate them and introduce them to schools. And they'll also be helping with spreading the word and getting people to come through distribution of flyers. And then Karen is so connected with so many different practitioners. So I've definitely had some conversations with people outside of this committee that's working on the guidelines regarding practice challenges that they've seen in schools. And then I'm also hoping that a lot of these OT practitioners will be attending the seminars come implementation time. And then also these people can be helping with spreading the word on the seminars and when they're happening. I've also been in contact with some OT practice leaders across the United States, and they have helped with ensuring I'm on the right track with the way I'm thinking about things and ensuring guidelines will reflect current policies and evidence-based practice. A lot of these states already have guidelines for OT practice, so it's been really helpful to talk to them about the way that they've framed guidelines and what they've included and what research they think is relevant. And then I also need to do more with talking with administrative staff within the schools, which I know Karen also has connections with. I'm planning to do that more in implementation, but just to kind of get a feel for budgeting trends and make sure that educational seminars are realistic and match those trends. And then I also am thinking that administrative staff will be the coordinators that sort of organize me coming to different schools to provide education. And I'm also hoping that administrative staff will be coming to my seminars. And then also, I will be speaking with special members on the special education team and related service people, just to talk about more insight into the OT's role in collaboration on the team. And then I'm also hoping that they will be coming to seminars. So I already went over a lot of this, but for my SWOT analysis, again, the VOTA committee and Karen herself have so many different connections, so that's definitely a strength. There's a low production cost for this project. There's a lot of people that I have connections to with a lot of experience working in the schools. There is no competition. There's no one else trying to make the guidelines before us or anything. There is some scholarly knowledge and some research that was done on OT practice as a related service, and best practice methods specifically in OT. I mean, in Vermont. But a weakness is that this research for best practice methods, specifically in Vermont, was done a few decades ago, so it's not the most current. There's also no one on the immediate committee with a specialty in social and emotional outcomes on the team, and I'll go over more of why that's important, but that's definitely the role of the OT in mental health is a major facet that I want to be focusing on in educational seminars, so that would be helpful insight to have. Opportunities, again, I'll be reaching out to other related service providers and educational stakeholders in Vermont through the Agency of Education. And then for threats, economic funding downturns for OT budgeting in public schools, current regulations, and potential changes in school policies, lack of interprofessional understanding for need for the guidelines as well. So for research questions, I have one overarching research question that is how do Vermont-based OTs envision practice changes as a result of voluntary Vermont OTP school-based guidelines? And then what I did was I made a research question for each of the sections that will be in the guidelines. So there will be 3 different sections in the guidelines, and I made a research question that kind of pertains to information that will be included in that section. And the research questions are also based on needs that were identified by the VOTA committee, of the way that the OT's role needs to be clarified. So the first research question for section 1 is how could occupational therapists expand their role in the school system to improve social and emotional outcomes in children? Section 2, how could OTs working with children expand their interprofessional role within the collaborative team? And then for section 3, how can OTs working with children expand their role to meet workload demands within the school system? So for section 1, just a brief overview of the literature. So it has definitely been shown that OT has a positive impact on mental health in students particularly. However, OTs are not fulfilling their potential to address social and emotional outcomes in schools. There's also evidence that OT intervention improves social and emotional outcomes in children who do not qualify for services. So in Vermont, OTs can provide school-wide services under the MTSS. However, a student needs to be on an IEP to get direct services and to be on that OT's caseload. So there's evidence that OTs, like OT intervention, would be beneficial even for kids that do not qualify for those services. So you can have emotional disturbance, or that's the word that they use in a lot of the school policies, or mental health issues, and still not qualify for an IEP and not qualify for those more direct OT services. So implications, OT should expand their role by providing more direct services to this population, and they should continue to provide intervention at a school-wide level. And then for section 2, interprofessional collaboration enhances OT treatment of students and increases job satisfaction. However, not enough collaboration is being done within schools. There's also evidence that it promotes safe and effective use of sensory techniques. Also, most of the United States continues to use a pull-out model when a push-in model is more effective. I will say that Vermont is an outlier where it does have more of an inclusive model than most other states, and it does use more push-in. However, talking with members of the VOTA committee and with different stakeholders, it's definitely been determined that there's still some communication difficulties that need to be sorted out, and there's also concerns around safe usage of sensory techniques and the way that OTs can provide more education and collaborate to help with usage of sensory techniques within the schools. So last one, section 3. Moving to the workload model allows OTs to better meet workload demands and improves effectiveness of treatment. And there's also evidence that administrative support can help to mitigate barriers to implementation of this model. So OT should expand their role to meet workload demands by embracing a workload model. And school administrative stakeholders should be made more aware of the role that they can play in helping to implement this workload model. So overall objectives of educational seminars, just to clarify, is to clarify OT's current role in the 3 facets that I specifically just talked about, promote understanding of recommendations for evidence-based practice change for the future, and also reaching valuable stakeholders to help with promoting practice changes. So I use the PEO model, and so basically the person, the practitioner with their values and beliefs that they hold will interpret the new guidelines in a certain way, which will impact the way that practice changes occur. The environment is the Vermont Public Schools and administration and stakeholders within the schools, and all schools will kind of have a different interpretation and follow the guidelines in their own way. So that will also impact things. Then also how OTs implement guidelines within their practice will determine resulting practice changes. So goals of this project, I will develop educational materials for educational workshops by week 9. So I will compile educational topics and send out flyers to different school districts to help spread the word. Goal number 2, following education, I will collect and analyze 10 responses from stakeholders to determine usability of resources used to further guide VOTA on additional needed revisions by week 13. So I will create surveys and finalize surveys, which I'll talk about a little bit more with my evaluation tools. And then I'll also interpret those results. And then goal number 3, I will educate special education professionals on the new practice guidelines through educational workshops in at least 6 school districts within Vermont. So 3 within Chittenden County and 3 within Northwestern Vermont. And then I will be presenting to the VOTA pediatric group to get feedback on my educational tools. So then the timeline just kind of reiterates my goals, but kind of working on drafting of the PowerPoint, getting feedback within the first few weeks. I'll start drafting the surveys in weeks 5 to 6, finalize flyers, week 7 to 8. I will really finalize the educational topics in the PowerPoint and send flyers out. I will finalize surveys. By week 9, I will have all the educational materials ready to go. And then in the next few weeks, I will be giving the educational seminars to school districts in Vermont. So about 2 per week. And then weeks 13 to 14, analyze the survey responses and present to the committee. So my evaluation plan for goal number 1, I will create the educational materials by getting feedback from different collaborators in the site mentor. For goal number two, I will have a mixed methods pre and post survey. So the pre-survey will be demographics questions, ranking general understanding of guidelines on a scale of 1 to 10. I will have participants rate on a scale of 1 to 10 understanding of the different facets that I was talking about that I'll be focusing on. And then for the post survey, I'll basically just be asking the same questions and seeing if answers have changed. And then I'll have an open response section to have participants describe recommendations that I talked about in the seminars to kind of gauge understanding as well. And then goal number three, I will have a tracking log to track different schools, tracking the number of participants. Demographic information will help me determine if I reached all the different stakeholders in different professions that I wanted to within the schools. And then at the end of the project, I will be getting feedback from Voda when I present. And then almost done. Proposed dissemination plan. Um, I've been talking about how I'm going to present at the end of the project, and then I will be finalizing that PowerPoint, making tweaks to everything after that based on feedback that they give me, and then sending it back out to the pediatric group so that my PowerPoint can be used as like a reference tool in the future. And then I was also thinking it would be great to go to the next VOTA conference and present relevant research and kind of talk about the new guidelines. And then, like everyone else, will be going to the Ziegler research poster presentation. And then just the impacts of the project. So increase understanding, will increase effectiveness of treatment and improvements in developmental progress of children, increasing understanding of the role of social and emotional outcomes, less instances of bullying, improved learning outcomes in children, increased understanding of how OTs can collaborate with other specialists, less OT burnout, more effective use of sensory-based techniques, and then increased understanding of the importance of implementing workload, hopefully getting more stakeholders on board with helping out with addressing barriers so that a workload model can be implemented. And then that would also help with burnout. And then those are my references.